You've probably heard all the hype around the Eluktronics MAG-15. I've got the Australian version of that here, the Vapor 15 Pro from Aftershock, which uses the same chassis. So let's find out how well it performs in 20 different games at all setting levels, and compare it against some other laptops to see the differences. For the specs, there's an Intel i7-9750H CPU, NVIDIA GTX 1660 Ti graphics, 16GB of memory and dual channel, and a 144Hz 1080p screen. It's also available with RTX 2070 Max-Q graphics though. I'll be testing this in a future video as well. So if you're new to the channel, you'll want to get subscribed for that. Otherwise, you can find updated prices to both configurations linked in the description. The Control Center software allows us to swap between different power settings. I've tested with performance mode for best performance and higher fan speed. By default, the i7-9750H CPU was also undervolted by -0.05 volts, which should help out a bit too. We'll only be covering gaming performance in this video. Thermal testing and the detailed full review will be covered in future videos. Let's start out by going through all 20 games at all setting levels, then afterwards we'll see how the Vapor 15 compares with some other laptops. Control was tested walking through the start of the game. I found medium settings to play quite well with above 60 FPS. High settings didn't go too badly. I don't think the game really needs a super high frame rate, but during fights I did find medium to work better and it still looked good. Battlefield 5 was tested in campaign mode, and it was playing alright even with ultra settings. The 1% low performance didn't change much between setting presets, but was always above 60 regardless of which was in use. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was tested with the built-in benchmark, and at higher settings, these results are some of the best I've seen from a laptop with these specs. We'll compare this game with some other laptops soon. Borderlands 3 was tested with the built-in benchmark and DirectX 11, as 12 is still in beta. In this test, high settings was required to hit a 60 FPS average, though we could get near 100 and above with low settings. Apex Legends was tested with either all settings at maximum or all settings at the lowest possible values, as it doesn't have predefined setting presets. It was playing fine even maxed out, with above 100 FPS averages, while minimum settings seemed to be hitting a 144 FPS frame cap. Ghost Recon Breakpoint was tested with the game's built-in benchmark, and ultra settings was still reaching above 60 FPS in this test, with 100 only just reached with the low setting preset. Far Cry New Dawn was also tested with the built-in benchmark, and as this is more of a CPU heavy test and we've still got an i7, the results weren't too different compared to other machines with the same CPU. However, despite the default CPU undervolt, I didn't see much improvement. I've had a few requests to add in a racing game, so I've got F1 2019 tested with the built-in benchmark. There wasn't much difference to the results with ultra low to high settings, while ultra high took a larger step back in comparison. Fortnite was tested with the replay feature in the new Chapter 2 map. This is my first time testing with the new map, so the results probably aren't too comparable to my previous results. In any case, 100 FPS averages was still possible even with epic settings. Overwatch is another game that runs well on pretty much any modern hardware. Even with epic settings, the 1% low is around 110 FPS, with the average close to the refresh rate of the screen. So again, no problem at all with this title. CSGO was tested using the Eluktronics FPS benchmark, and as a game that depends primarily on CPU power, the results are a little better than most other i7 laptops, likely due to that small default undervolt. Dota 2 was tested playing in the middle lane, and as a primarily CPU-driven game, the results were good, but not really much different compared to a similarly spec'd machine that isn't undervolted. Regardless, absolutely nothing to complain about with these results. Rainbow Six Siege was tested with the built-in benchmark. At max settings, 120 FPS averages was still possible in this test, while high settings was higher than the refresh rate of the display, with decent 1% low performance too. Metro Exodus was tested using the built-in benchmark. Most parts of the game perform a fair bit better than this, so don't take these results as a good indication of what to expect throughout the entire game. It's more of a worst case. The Division 2 was also tested with the built-in benchmark, and above 60 FPS averages were possible with the highest ultra setting preset, though we could more than double this with low settings. PUBG was tested using the replay feature. With the highest ultra setting preset, 90 FPS was still possible in this test, while low settings and below was capable of delivering higher frame rates than the screen's refresh rate of 144Hz. Assassin's Creed Odyssey was tested with the built-in benchmark, and as a CPU-heavy test, we're seeing 2 to 4 FPS higher on average at the highest setting presets compared to the Aura 7 I've recently tested with same specs, likely due to that CPU undervolt. Watch Dogs 2 was a resource-heavy game, but as I can play it just fine with a solid 30 FPS, there weren't any issues even with ultra settings, despite the lower-looking frame rates. The Witcher 3 played just fine even with the ultra setting preset. However, it was possible to significantly improve performance just by stepping down one level. I think high settings would be better as it still looks good and you're getting around 100 FPS. Strange Brigade was tested just so we've got a Vulcan title in the mix. The built-in benchmark tool was able to score 100 FPS even with the highest ultra setting preset, so it's all looking good here. Let's also take a look at how this config of Aftershock's Vapor 15 compares with other laptops. Use these results as a rough guide only, as they were tested at different times with different drivers. In Battlefield 5, I've got the Vapor 15 highlighted in red near similarly spec'd machines. The results here are quite good. It was less than 1 FPS lower in terms of average compared to the Helios 300. Though to be fair, I did test that one months ago now, and I think the game has had some updates since. The 1% low performance is still a fair bit behind the Helios, but the Helios does have a higher -0.125 volt undervolt at stock, which will help there. These are the results from Far Cry 5 with ultra settings in the built-in benchmark. As a CPU-heavier test, it's further behind the Helios 300 with same specs this time. However, the performance was a little ahead of the Lenovo Wi-Fi 40 and Aura 7 with same specs, so fair results. These are the results from Shadow of the Tomb Raider with the built-in benchmark at highest settings. This time, the Vapor 15 was just slightly ahead of the Helios 300, putting this machine in first place out of all 1660 Ti laptops that I've tested. At least for this game anyway. Granted, it was only 1 FPS ahead. However, there's a fair gap compared to the other machines with same specs below it. Overall, the performance from the Vapor 15 seems to be above average when compared with other laptops that have the same GTX 1660 Ti and i7 9750H with dual-channel memory. The small stock CPU undervolt would be giving it a little edge over most other laptops. The Helios 300 has a higher CPU power limit, undervolts further, and overclocks the GPU, which is why it's a little ahead with the same hardware. Let me know if you'd be interested in a detailed comparison between the two. The Vapor 15 with these specs is easily able to play modern games at 1080p even with higher settings without any issues. Let me know what you thought of the performance from the Vapor 15 gaming laptop from Aftershock down in the comments. We'll look at thermals in depth in an upcoming video, and the full review is still to come. So if you're new to the channel, consider getting subscribed for those, as well as future tech videos like this one.